Here is this week charity news, starting 24th of November. Swimming at Medina Leisure Centre, Newport, between 1:15 and 2:15. The cost is £6 and transport is available. We have full use of the pool, and therefore, even if you just like gentle exercise in the water, please come along. You will be very welcome.
Our IT drop-in resumes at Millbrook House on Monday 9:30 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. This is now an appointment-only service, so please call the office and book a slot with Sam. Yoga is not on this week due to the volunteers' catch-up.
Coffee and chat is on Wednesdays between 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. at Millbrook House. Please come along and meet the staff, volunteers and members for a chat, and also to look at second-hand equipment, seek advice. This is open to everyone.
We are delighted to announce that we will be having Hayley in on Thursday the 7th of December to run a foot care clinic. Hayley not only cuts nails but deals with hard skin, callus, treatment of corns, verrucas, plus foot cream with a massage. The appointment will be a half-hour slot and the cost is £25. Clinics will be held at Millbrook House on a Thursday. Hayley is also available for home visits if required. If you would like an appointment, please call Susan.
We still have a few of our charity Christmas cards at only £3.50 per pack of 10. Please call the office if you would like some. Also, calendar and diaries are available to order.
We are very pleased to announce we have been donated a beautiful hand-sewn quilt, which we have decided to raffle. You can buy a square for £2 from the office. The draw will take place on December the 13th. It is a king-size quilt and beautiful. It is hung in Millbrook House on display.
Everyone should have now received raffle tickets. But if you would like more, please do not hesitate to call the office and we can send you more out. We have some wonderful prizes on offer, from the luxury hamper, bottles of wine, numerous vouchers, etc. We will be drawing the raffle on our Christmas festive morning on the 13th of December. If you would like to join us for mull wine and mince pies, please call the office and let us know. The invitation is open to everyone.
Our wonderful volunteers have once again been busy knitting chocolate orange covers that are available for £3 each from Millbrook House.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. Council opens waste and recycling survey for islanders' thoughts. What do you think of your waste and recycling service? That's the question being posed by the Isle of Wight Council as it launches its annual customer satisfaction survey. The authority is responsible for the collection, treatment, recycling and disposal of household recyclables and waste on the island. This is delivered through a contract with its waste provider. Every year, the council asks residents for their views and ideas on how the island can recycle more and reduce its waste. Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox, Cabinet Member for Waste, has said, "We're asking you to share your views and experiences of waste services across the island, including household waste, recycling and food waste collections, bulky waste collections, and the recycling centres. It's also your chance to give us ideas on how we can continue to recycle more and reduce waste. Natasha Dix, Service Director for Waste, Environment and Planning, said, "Thank you in advance for taking the time to give us your feedback on the waste and recycling services you receive. Your opinion really counts. Your feedback from the survey will help to identify what aspects of these services you're happy with, as well as the areas which could be improved. Once the survey has finished, and of course, we will let you know the results." The consultation, which can be accessed by visiting this link, will run until midnight on Friday, 12th of January 2024. Paper versions are available by request. Direct request for paper copies by emailing waste.contract@iow.gov.uk or call 01983 823 777. Paper copies will also be available at all council-run local libraries. Unfortunately, no responses received after the closing date can be considered by the council.
This is Chris, reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Brakes slammed on East Cowes Venture Keys plans. No interest in an Isle of Wight housing plan has put the brakes on a crucial project. The Isle of Wight Council has been trying for years to find a partner to develop 2 sites in East Cowes, but recent attempts have been unsuccessful, the authority said. In September 2020, it bought the plots of land making up Venture Keys for £1.3 million. As part of the deal with Homes England, the council has to build homes on the land at Maresfield Road car park and opposite, which currently houses Island Business Tea Mill. The authority has to have secured planning permission by March 2024 and start development by March 2025, or risk having to sell the land back to the government for £1. The deadlines for the planning permission and development have already been pushed back twice, but the council has previously said it can request a change of dates again if needed. Speaking at the council's cabinet meeting last week, Councillor Phil Jordan, the council leader, said the authority was taking it off their work plan as there was no way of moving it forward at this stage. Councillor Jordan said the council had previously looked for a partner to build care housing on the Maresfield site, but there was no interest in the site. A council spokesperson confirmed they were looking for other options to use the land in line with the conditions set by Homes England. It says it currently has no plans to hand the sites back to the government body and will review the housing plan and development conditions once a way forward has been identified. At a previous attempt to find a partner in May 2022, 4 expressions of interest were made. A feasibility study of the site done last year determined it had severe negative viability, and there was no interest from an affordable housing provider.
Solent Cluster launches new report revealing thousands of local jobs and economic growth from the Island Echo, read by Lee. Over 70,000 jobs could be secured, including the creation of over 18,000 new skilled jobs as part of a potential £11.9 billion economic boost driven by decarbonisation in the Solent region. These benefits are identified in a social economic report launched at an event to mark the 1-year anniversary of the Solent Cluster, which was formed to lead the region's ambitions to achieve net zero by 2050. Anne-Marie Mountfield, chairman of the Solent Cluster, who spoke at the launch, said decarbonisation will be a catalyst for transformative change as we seek to propel the region into a new era of sustainable growth. The importance of identifying the potential for thousands of new jobs and billions in investment cannot be underestimated. The report not only looks at the potential economic and environmental impact of the cluster's vision for the Solent region, but also the skills and educational focus needed to enable the development of specific decarbonisation projects. The Solent Cluster Social Economic Report identifies potential across the following key areas: sustaining employment, sustain 70,000 jobs, providing a robust employment landscape that could foster economic resilience in the Solent region; job growth, potential creation of 18,900 jobs by 2035, strategic investment, potential investment of almost £12 billion, signalling a commitment to the region's infrastructure and economic growth. Economic contribution, over £4.4 billion of potential gross value added to the economy by 2035, underlying the Solent region's vital contribution to the UK economy. Carbon capture potential. The Solent region has a capacity to potentially capture and safely store up to 10 million tonnes of CO2 annually. Speakers at the event included Paul Greenwood, chairman of ESSO UK, Councillor Jill Cleary, leader of New Forest District Council, and Fergus Tickle, Hydrogen Solutions lead at SGN. The Solent Cluster saw many of its 100 members join industry leaders, policymakers and community stakeholders at the event, which provided further opportunity for collaboration and partnership.
Hello, this is an article from the Island Echo read by Sue. Council reveals new director for Children's Services after split from Hampshire. The Isle of Wight Council has revealed who will be the new senior manager leading services for children, young people and families across the island. Following a nationwide search, Ashley Whitaker has been appointed as the authority's new Director of Children's Services. Subject to the appointment process, it is hoped that Ashley will be able to take up his post from the 1st of February 2024. As the Council steps away from a 10-year strategic partnership with Hampshire County Council, he will lead a dedicated and passionate team to create an independent service to be proud of. Following teaching and leadership roles within schools, Ashley has worked across a range of children's services, including education, health, social care and special educational needs and disabilities. He also brings to the role extensive experience of working with partner organisations, including the voluntary sector. Speaking about his appointment, Ashley has said, "I am very much looking forward to meeting and working with colleagues both inside and outside the council, and of course with the children, young people and families we serve. Establishing an independent children's services that dictoriate within the council, following the cessation of arrangements with Hampshire, is an exciting opportunity to build on the improvements and progress of recent years. I'm also looking forward to working collaboratively and in partnership to make the life outcomes for children on the Isle of Wight as good as they can be." Wendy Pereira, the Council's Chief Executive, has said, "We look forward to welcoming Ashley to the senior management team at the Council. The partnership with Hampshire over the past 10 years has delivered real improvements in children's social care and education on the island. With the partnership ceasing comes an opportunity to continue to improve outcomes for families and young people on the island. Ashley, using his substantial knowledge and skills, will lead the way in shaping a service tailored precisely to the needs of those it supports. Putting our young people and our community at the heart of what we do is essential to providing an excellent service for them. In Ashley, we have an inspirational director who is committed to driving forward our vision with a passion to support our communities into the future." Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, adds, "These are some very big issues to deal with in the coming months and years, But the changes we are going through and the appointment of Ashley means we will be in an excellent place to address these issues and to realise the great opportunities the changes in fact present us with. I am very much looking forward to working with Ashley as we establish our newly independent Children's Services Department and take things forward for our island children.
This is Brian reading an item from Isle of Wight Radio. Islanders urged to stay safe along the coast amid landslide fears. People are being urged to stay safe at the coast amid landslide fears. Weeks of heavy rain means the risk of rockfalls is even greater than usual and is likely to remain high until the spring, the Isle of Wight Council warned. Parts of the island have already seen significant ground movement, such as between Bontchurch and Luckham, where footpaths have been closed off for people's safety. Natasha Dix, the Council's Strategic Manager for Environment, said, "The island has suffered some of the heaviest rainfall it has ever seen, leaving the ground sodden and cliff faces unstable. While the island's coast is a wonderful place to visit, it's important to use common sense and caution, staying away from the edge and base of cliffs, and always pay attention to warning signs and safety messages. Admire the views from a safe distance and keep dogs on leads." Councillor Karen Lucioni, Cabinet Member for Community Protection, added, "Our coast is a dynamic environment that is changing all the time, and the potential threat to human life is very real. Periods of intense rainfall can make cliff edges more vulnerable and likely to collapse. You do not want to be nearby if that happens. Our advice is take notice of warning signs and avoid going directly under or on top of cliffs, no matter how tempting it might be. If you do get into trouble or believe anybody to be in difficulty at the coast or at the sea, please call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard."
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. £13.6 million investment in Isle of Wight's walking and cycling networks confirmed. The Isle of Wight is to receive an additional £13.6 million to improve walking and cycling networks across the island, plus a 21-kilometre nature reserve, luggage lockers, e-bike hire and real-time bus information. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has made the funds available through round 3 of its Levelling Up Fund, with the money earmarked to deliver 3 interconnected projects. The island previously secured £5.8 million in the first funding round to develop a marine hub in East Cowes. The first of the new projects to be funded will result in the development of a green link corridor between Ryde and Yarmouth to encourage people to leave their cars at home and travel more by bike, bus or on foot. The second project will see the development of a multi-use 13-mile cycle route between Newport and Freshwater, known as the West Wight Greenway, providing an important link to the Gunville Greenway and improving access to the rest of the island's cycle network. The third project will see an extension of existing cycle routes in and around Newport, connecting Green Link projects with existing sustainable transport networks. There will also be investment in a public transport corridor with accessibility ramps, shelters and real-time information screens. There will be a small number of trial mobility hubs too, where luggage lockers and e-bikes will be available. Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley has welcomed the major government investment. He said, "I am delighted government has committed this money to the island. I've been campaigning for the West Wight Greenway. It is a critical link in the development of our island cycle routes." Whilst we are largely dependent on our cars in the more rural parts of the island, making bus travel cheaper and more attractive, as we've done with the £2 bus fare, and investing in our cycle and walking routes will make alternative methods of transport more attractive for some people, some of the time. It is a valuable investment at relatively little cost. The cycle routes are important for transport, for health, and the tourism industry. I'm glad we are continuing to get a better deal for islanders. We are going to see improvements to our sustainable transport networks, which will benefit islanders and visitors. I caught up with representatives from Cycle Wight very recently. I'm aware there is work that could be done to improve the surfacing of the route between Sandown and Newport. I'll be talking to the Isle of Wight Council as to whether some of the money can be used for that purpose as well. Councillor Julie Jones-Evans, Cabinet Member for Regeneration, has said, "We have already done plenty of work on these projects, including the West Wight and Gunville Greenways, with positive involvement and support from local landowners and user groups such as Cycle Wight and the Isle of Wight Ramblers. I am delighted that we can now put these ambitious plans into practice, not just for the West Wight, but extending the route towards Ryde, creating a natural corridor for visitors and locals alike to travel safely and sustainably through some of the most beautiful landscapes in Britain. Investment from our Regen team has borne fruit with another quality bid that will reap benefits across the island. I went to my first Gunville Greenway meeting in 2010, so I'm unbelievably happy at today's announcement. It's a long game sometimes, but you have to keep playing. Island MP Bob Seeley added, "I am delighted government has committed this money to the island. I've been campaigning for the West Wight Greenway. It is a critical link in the development of our island cycle routes. The cycle routes are important for transport, for health, and the tourism industry. We are going to see improvements to our sustainable transport networks, which will benefit islanders and visitors."
Robin Hill up for grabs as guide price for attraction revealed. From the Isle of Wight Radio, read by Lee. Robin Hill Country Park in Newport has been brought to the market for a guide price of £2.25 million. The property comprises an extensive selection of attractions, including a 4D motion cinema, 777-seat amphitheatre, toboggan run, high nets, adventure areas and playgrounds, as well as having food and drinks options on site. The park is known as the former location of the annual Bestival Music Festival, and in more recent times has held nationally award-winning events such as Fiesta of the Dead and the Isle of Wight Balloon Festival, which encourages tourists to flock to the area each year. Located in the area of outstanding natural beauty in Downs End, just 2.5 miles off the south coast of Hampshire, Robin Hill benefits from car ferry services from Fishbourne, Cowes and Yarmouth, linking to Portsmouth, Southampton and Lymington. The business is currently operated by Vectis Ventures Limited and generates income primarily from entrance fees, food and beverage and shop sales. The park has traditionally been open from February to October, with additional open days for special events such as the Polar Experience and Christmas parties in the winter. Vectis Ventures had previously blamed an extended period of financial turbulence caused by COVID, the cost of living crisis, and poor spring and summer weather for necessitating the sale.
Hello, this is an article from the Isle of Wight Radio, read by Sue. Isle of Wight Armed Forces community in line for additional funding. More funding could be on the cards to celebrate the Armed Forces community on the Isle of Wight. The request came from Councillor Ian Daw, a former soldier, for a more robust commitment from the Isle of Wight Council to Armed Forces Day. This year's successful event took place in Ryde on June the 25th and attracted thousands of islanders showing their support to the community, and more than those who turned out in Portsmouth, according to Councillor Daw. The Isle of Wight Council unanimously agreed to support Councillor Daw's motion, which called on the authority to consider increasing the financial contribution to the event. Speaking at a meeting on Wednesday, Councillor Daw, the authority's Armed Forces champion, said, looking at previous events, it was clear the council was not doing quite enough to support it, but it was within the council's gift to make a positive difference. He said more money would ensure the future sustainability of the event and bring it up to date, solidifying the council's unflinching commitment to it, morally and financially. He said, as per the Armed Forces Covenant, which the council has signed up to, the council is directed to waive all ground fees or other admin charges as well. Councillor Richard Quigley seconded the calls for more money and said, we quite often get accused of gesture politics, and this is an actual chance for us to do something that is not just a gesture. It is something meaningful for the 16,000 Armed Forces community that live on the island. Cabinet Member for Finance, Councillor Ian Stevens, said he fully supported Councillor Daw, but feared waiving the fees for the event would set a precedent and lead to other groups calling for the same treatment. The budget setting process will be completed in February when the Isle of Wight Council will set its savings and spending targets for the year ahead.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. 88% of the Isle of Wight's 45 schools to face funding cuts in 2024. Local education union boss Peter Shreve has claimed that 40 out of the Isle of Wight's 45 schools will face real term cuts from April of next year. Mr. Shreve further claims that pupils will experience an average cut of £158 per pupil. Last week, the education unions NEU, ASCL and NAHT, supported by Parentkind, launched the updated School Cuts website, showing the impact of government funding decisions on every mainstream school in England. Nationally, 92% of mainstream schools face real terms cuts from April. Peter Shreve, Assistant District Secretary of the National Education Union, has said, "We know island schools remain concerned over funding. This was clear in last week's Island Schools Forum meeting. Regrettably, years of underfunding are still impacting negatively on learners. Calculations show 40 island schools out of 45 faced cuts in 2024. Schools will experience an average £158 cut per pupil. Thus, the amount needed to restore per pupil funding in real terms to its 2023-24 level will be an extra £2.4 million. Estimated secondary cuts per pupil are as high as £218. This equates to £295,674 in Ryde Academy. Primary schools, being smaller, are hit even harder. The highest per pupil cut in real terms is an estimated £329, which equates to a whole school cut of £32,287 in St Helens Primary. Despite having slightly lower per pupil cuts, the overall school cuts in Gurnard and Lanes End are even greater, with estimated costs of £119,100 to Gurnard and £126,380 to Lanes End. To understand how your child's school will be affected, visit www.schoolcuts.org.uk.
This is Chris, reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Zach to the future. Swim star strikes gold again as exciting 2024 beckons. Talented Isle of Wight athlete Zach Lacey topped off a successful calendar year by retaining his 200-metre and 50-metre butterfly titles at the British Down Syndrome Swimming Championships last weekend at the K2 Leisure Centre in Crawley. The competition brings together more than 130 swimmers from across Britain to compete among their national peers. Zach competed in 6 events and retained his 2022 titles in 200-metre butterfly and 50-metre butterfly. He also gained silver medals over the 2-day competition in the 400-metre freestyle, 100-metre individual medley, 100-metre butterfly and 50-metre backstroke. It has been a busy year for Zach, with the European Championships and the Virtus Global Games competitions, and in total he has received 10 individual and 3 team relay medals. Zach has become an experienced member of Down Syndrome Swimming Great Britain, DSSGB, over the past 7 years. In addition to his efforts in the water, Zach's hard work at training camps has also developed young swimmers within the squad. His remarkable efforts were recognised by outgoing head coach of DSGB, Keith Hall, as he awarded Zach the DSSGB Swimmer of the Year trophy for 2023. Zach would like to thank all of his coaches and colleagues at Sea Close Swimming Club and the Isle of Wight Council Talented Athlete Scheme, which sees Wightlink continue to allow him support with travel.
Winter crisis. Animal abandonment numbers soar on the Isle of Wight in 2023. From the Isle of Wight Radio, read by Lee. The RSPCA has highlighted a 33.8% rise in incidents of animal abandonments on the Isle of Wight amid 3-year high. Such incidents have soared as the RSPCA warns that unwanted pets face a bleak winter, with incidents on the Isle of Wight rising sharply compared with 2020. The animal welfare charity has today, Wednesday, released shocking new stats that show abandonments have been spiralling amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. Already this year, up to the end of October, the animal welfare charity has received 17,838 reports of abandoned animals across England and Wales, which, if such trends continue, would equate to 21,417 reports over 2023. This compares with 16,118 reports during the whole of 2020, meaning the RSPCA is on course to see an eye-watering 32.9% rise in abandonment calls this year. It's higher too than the number of reports received in 2021, which was 17,179, and 2022, which were 19,645. And on the Isle of Wight, the charity is on course to receive 47 reports of animal abandonment this year, making a 33.8% rise on the number of reports received in the local community in 2020. Dermot Murphy, who heads the RSPCA frontline rescue team, said, "The combined effects of the pandemic and the ongoing cost of living crisis has created a perfect storm, and means we expect more animals than ever will need our help this year. Abandonment calls to our emergency lines are now at a 3-year high as we respond to an increasing number of animals being given up and dumped, Our rescue teams are set to be busier than ever this Christmas, so we need animal lovers to join the Christmas rescue and donate to help us be there for animals in desperate need as neglect and abandonment soars. This year, the RSPCA is asking supporters to join the Christmas rescue by donating to help rescue teams reach the thousands of animals who desperately need them.
Hello, this is an article from the Island Echo, read by Sue. Footprint Trust boss steps down and calls made for trustee resignations amid funding fiasco. Calls have been made for the trustees of the Footprint Trust to stand down after rejecting £900,000 of funding from the government that could have helped thousands of islanders this winter. Back in August, Island Echo reported that Newport-based charity, the Footprint Trust, had secured almost £1 million of government funding from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, in conjunction with the Southwest Net Zero Hub. This money was to explore cutting-edge approaches to delivering in-person home energy advice to householders on the Isle of Wight and in the Southampton region. Work to secure this funding began back in March and was contractually agreed at the beginning of October. However, it has now emerged that just 2 weeks after the contract was signed, the trustees of the Footprint Trust declined the funding, seemingly without any consultation with other bid partners, including Southampton-based Teslans, who were to receive around a third of the funding. It's thought that around 9,000 islanders would have been positively affected by this golden funding overall, with many island businesses also set to benefit from work carried out under the project. The decision to reject the funding potentially leaves the most vulnerable island residents cold and face falling into fuel poverty and debt. It's been revealed that Norman Arnold, the charity's managing director, has now stepped down over the decision made by the trustees, as has Lisa Beanie, the finance and operations manager. Island Echo approached the Footprint Trust for a statement at the end of October. In response, trustee Sue Painting said that discussions on the matter of the funding were at a stage where they were not able to comment fully. Furthermore, it was said that due to the confidential nature of some aspects, they could not give a timescale as to when a full statement could be given. Mrs. Painting said that she wished to stress the top priority of the Trust was to continue to help those in fuel poverty. Sources say that the trustees have since explained their decision by stating that Mr. Arnold had acted outside his authority and that the project was too risky, despite the money coming from central government. One commentator has said, "With the state of the economy, the island has to work very hard to get grants, and it was fortunate to receive the massive £900,000 in support. For a group of trustees to then simply decide they now don't want it, fails the people it is meant to help, puts a strain on local companies left footing the bill, and makes staff very concerned about their future. What happens the next time the island applies for such a grant of magnitude? Will we be taken seriously? The island needed this, why throw it away?" According to the Charity Commission, the Footprint Trust Limited made £217,000 in the last financial year, a new record amount with an expenditure of just £155,000. The trustees are listed as Anne Ray, Richard Quigley, Donald Rowe, Susan Painting, Mark Earp, Paul Fuller JP and Colin Withers. Local councillors have been made aware of the situation, and it is understood discussions are underway in a bid to rescue the funding, but the situation is said to be challenging.
This is the second part of the Talking News read by Francis and
Gerard.
we begin with more news items taken from the County Press and the Observer. Residents fury as marsh-like gardens sink. Ryde lawns swamped by water deluge. A group of residents from Ryde are calling for something to be done about their marsh-like back gardens. Residents on part of the West Acre Park estate say their backyard plots are often underwater. They say rainfall and runoff are to blame. Island Road said some of the problems were down to an historic arrangement. Developer Captiva Homes said it believes there is an easy resolution. An Isle of Wight house builder is in disagreement with Island Roads about displaced water running into one of its developments, the County Press can reveal, as those living there are left to deal with flooding in their gardens. Island Roads has told the County Press drainage arrangements near Westacre Park Ryde have been in place for many years. Residents on part of the Captiva Homes development say they don't care who is to blame, they're just fed up with seeing their yards flooded and want it solved. A number of residents with houses at the back of the Marlborough Road allotments say water has come gushing into their gardens. One of these, Alan Brown, said drainage in his garden was insufficient. He is worried it could have repercussions if he tries to sell. Captiva said it is aware of the problem and believes water entering gardens could be substantially reduced. A spokesperson from Captiva Homes said, "We have investigated some individual gardens. In a proactive measure, Captiva Homes has filed a complaint with Island Roads on behalf of the residents, and our legal team is involved. We eagerly await a response." A spokesperson for Island Roads said, "We are sorry to hear that residents in this area are experiencing flooding. For many years, certainly prior to the commencement of the PFI contract in 2013, water from Marlborough Road and Circular Road has discharged via an existing highway surface water system onto adjoining fields and onward through the watercourse running north towards the sea outfall at Spring Vale. Island Roads will look to engage with those stakeholders affected whilst further investigating the impact that changes to the landscape have had. There are separate issues further along the development. Westacre Park resident Adam Shackleton says his garden turns into a massive pond every time it rains. He said Captiva put French drains in 2 years ago, but this appeared not to have worked.
Landslip triggers safety warnings. The Isle of Wight Council has shared photos of a recent landslip in South Wight, prompting an urge for islanders to stay safe amid further fears of rockfalls. Weeks of heavy rains means the risk of rockfalls is greater than usual and is likely to remain high until the spring, the council has warned. Parts of the island have already seen significant ground movement, such as between Bonchurch and Lockham, where footpaths have been closed off for people's safety. Natasha Dix, the council's strategic manager for environment, said, "The island has suffered some of the heaviest rainfall it has ever seen, leaving the ground sodden and cliff faces unstable. While the island's coast is a wonderful place to visit, it's important to use common sense and caution, stay away from the edge and base of cliffs, and always Pay attention to warning signs and safety messages. Admire the views from a safe distance and keep dogs on leads. Councillor Karen Lucioni, Cabinet Minister for Community Protection, added, "Our coast is a dynamic environment that is changing all the time, and the potential threat to human life is very real. Periods of intense rainfall can make cliff edges more vulnerable and likely to collapse. You do not want to be nearby if that happens. Our advice is take notice of warning signs and avoid going directly under or on top of cliffs, no matter how tempting it might be. If you do get into trouble or believe anyone to be in difficulty at the coast or at the sea, please call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard."
School bakes way to record. An Isle of Wight school has baked its way into the record books. Cowes Enterprise College and the Ormiston Academies Trust now holds a Guinness World Record for the largest baking lesson, multiple venues. More than 700 individual bakers from across schools stepped into the kitchen for a virtual cooking lesson. Of those, 25 students from Cowes put on their aprons to learn how to create a delicious, record-breaking mango galette. In an official presentation ceremony, a Guinness World Records adjudicator confirmed that the Ormiston Academies Trust has beaten the previous record, which stood at 497 people. 713 budding bakers took part in the live tutorial. Dan Woods, lead practitioner for food design and technology at Ormiston Academies Trust, said, "We are so proud of all our academies, staff and students for getting involved with this exciting challenge. It was great to see how much all our bakers across the county enjoyed creating their galettes, and the icing on the cake was to hear the Guinness World Records team confirm that we have officially broken the previous record. The record-breaking attempt follows the Trust's The Great Ormiston Bake Competition last year, when more than 3,000 students competed."
Fraud to feature on TV. One of the biggest trading standards prosecutions ever brought by the Isle of Wight Council will be featured on national television next week. Earlier this year, the authority was successful in bringing a case against Simon Regan, the director of Angel Coatings, who was jailed for 3 years for fraudulent trading. Regan's company laid resin drives and pathways, charging customers thousands of pounds for work which was not up to scratch. Following the court case in February, trading standards officers and several witnesses were interviewed for Defenders UK, the BBC One show, which highlights the work authorities are doing to protect the public. The Island episode is due to air on Monday, the 27th of November at 10 a.m. During the trial, the court heard evidence from 65 witnesses from the Isle of Wight, Hampshire and Devon, where Regan's company had committed offences. The collective fraud of these contracts was valued at around £300,000. Regan's offending included gross overcharging, works that were poorly or incompetently installed, 10-year guarantees that were worthless and had little value, remedial works that were only partially undertaken or not undertaken at all, and the non-return of deposits paid when cancellation rights had been exercised. Witnesses told the court Reagan, 58 years old, would make threats to rip up the dryways if he did not receive payment in full, and when civil actions was attempted, would threaten consumers again.
Abandoned Camp Hill house is demolished. An abandoned house opposite the disused Camp Hill prison has been knocked down, but without planning permission. The Firs on Poston Road had been empty for years, but in recent months was demolished to make way for new houses. It was done so without planning permission, so now Waterlooville-based Colwell Bay Development is seeking retrospective consent. The developer, which now owns the site, has cleared the land to allow the building of 6 more homes where the Firs previously stood. Plans were submitted earlier in the year for 9 houses to make the most efficient use of the site, but was subsequently withdrawn. Concern has been raised by Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council about it being cramped and visually intrusive. The new plans submitted have been previously considered by the Isle of Wight Council and refused. In 2019, the same proposals were submitted by a different developer and were approved by the government's planning inspectorate. You can view the plans on the Isle of Wight Council's planning portal. Comments can be made until December the 8th.
Robin Hill for sale with 2.25 million guide price. Robin Hill Country Park has been put up for sale with a guide price revealed as 2.25 million. Following its earlier than usual closure, the company behind Robin Hill, Vectis Ventures, which also runs Black Gang Chine, announced the country park was for sale in October. The park comprises various attractions, including a 4D motion cinema, a 777-seater amphitheater, a toboggan run, high nets adventures, areas and playgrounds, as well as food and drink options on site. Robin Hill is on 88 acres of rolling parkland, natural woodland, and island countryside gardens. It also has planning consents for holiday accommodation to include 9 tree houses, 23 lodges, and 40 glamping camps. The car park has 1,500 spaces and 12 coaches spaces. The park is also known as a former location of the annual Bestival Music Festival, and in more recent times has held nationally award-winning events such as Fiesta of the Dead and the Isle of Wight Balloon Festival. Kay Griffiths, Associate Director in the trade-related team at Agents Saville, says, Robin Hill offers a unique opportunity to acquire a popular visitor attraction on the island.
Mayor apologises for grabbing man's beard in drunken incident. A mayor has sincerely apologised after an incident where she drunkenly grabbed a man's beard. Police were called on November the 3rd at 1:39 a.m. to report a man in his 30s was assaulted by a woman, later confirmed to be East Cowes Mayor, Councillor Tracy Riordan, outside the Conservative Club on Clarence Road in the town. At the time, Councillor Riordan was not acting in her capacity as town mayor. A spokesperson from Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary said it was reported the woman, who was intoxicated, grabbed the man's beard and attempted to grab his phone, but no injuries were sustained. The spokesperson said officers spoke with all parties involved and a 55-year-old woman has been dealt with by means of community resolution. This decision has been made in consultation with the victim and requires the woman to write a letter of apology and complete a diversionary course. At last Thursday's East Cowes Town Council meeting, a short statement was read out by Sue Chilton, the council's clerk, on behalf of the body. In it she said there had been recent coverage about the incident involving Councillor Riordan and confirmed the police have dealt with it and are not taking any official action. Ms Chilton said Councillor Riordan has voluntarily resigned from the Conservative Club and offered her sincere apologies to those concerned. This council now considers the matter closed. Councillor Riordan, a local businesswoman who has been Mayor of East Cowes since 2022, did not say anything on the matter. All the members of the public at the meeting were in support of Councillor Riordan.
Fire officers join death investigation. Fire officers were called in as part of an investigation into the death of a man at an address in Ryde. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary was called to a property on Swanmoor Road on Tuesday the 21st of November. A man in his 50s had died, police said. Officers said the death was being treated as unexplained. They remained at the property near the junction with Ashy Road on Wednesday. Fire officers were also drafted in to assist with the safety of the building and ensure that the site is safe. A spokesperson for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service said, firefighters were in attendance at Swanmoor Road in Ryde to support our police colleagues with an incident. Our teams were called to the scene at around 9 a.m. on Wednesday. Police said the men's family have been informed.
Pubs on Toilet Roll of Honour. 2 J.D. Wetherspoons pubs on the island have demonstrated their toilets are far from bog standard, with recognition in this year's prestigious Loo of the Year awards. The Toilet Roll of Honour, with a platinum rating by judges, includes S. Fowler and Company in Union Street, Ryde, and The Man in the Moon in St James Street, Newport. The awards are aimed at highlighting and improving standards of toilet provision across the UK. Loo of the Year awards inspectors made unannounced visits to thousands of toilets at sites across the UK. All of the toilets are graded silver, gold, platinum, platinum plus or diamond, with unacceptable toilets not graded at all. The toilets are judged against numerous criteria, including decor and maintenance, cleanliness, accessibility, hand washing and drying equipment, and overall management. Stephen Newby, who manages J.D. Wetherspoon in Ryde, said, "Staff at the pub ensure the toilets are in excellent condition at all times, and it is great this has been recognised by the inspectors." Loo of the Year Awards 2023 Managing Director, Becky Wall, said the toilets at both island pubs have been designed and fitted out to a very high standard.
Closure warning issued. Some Alowat schools are more than likely to be identified for potential closure in the new year, but the Alowat Council says it will be a new process and will be on equal footing. The local authority is once again considering how to solve the problem of falling pupil numbers. It comes months after it scrapped controversial plans, which named Cowes Primary, Roxall Primary, and St. Mary's in Ryde as schools earmarked for possible closure. At the same time, head teachers slammed what they called a significant lack of professionalism from County Hall. When discussions are reopened, this whole school estate will be under consideration, said Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Member for Children's Services. In a statement, he said, "We have to address the issue of excess places. The issue affects the whole island and is directly related to the key concern of raising educational standards on the island." An Alowite Council report revealed 213 vacant reception places in 2022-2023, the equivalent of 7 classes. The number of primary school children will fall from 9,200 in 2017 to around 8,000 by 2025, the report added. It has already been announced that Chillerton and Rookley Primary School will shut its doors for the final time at the end of next month, that is December. Councillor Bacon said, "In the new year, once the authority's senior education management team is in place, we will be going out to the public to provide information on the issues that must be addressed." He added, "It will be a fresh process and all schools will go into it on an equal footing. This means that neither the 3 schools originally mentioned in the process earlier this year, nor indeed any school, is or will be identified at this stage as being proposed for closure." Councillor Bacon said he hopes by next Easter, County Hall will have reached a fully informed view as to what steps need to be taken. He said, if, as seems more than likely, some schools are identified for potential closure, the reasons for this must be clearly communicated and understood, and there must be full support for all who stand to be affected, including staff, parents, children, and local communities, including clear information about what options arise and how the impacts of any closure are to be addressed. All options and potential alternatives will be considered. Any formal statutory process is likely to commence in the summer of 2024. School closures or other measures decided would take effect from autumn 2025. New Children's Services Director will be appointed.
Net profit for charity match. The latest in a series of football matches played by an island football team in support of a national mental health charity helped give the fundraising total another boost. Another £100 was raised in aid of the Mental Health Foundation by a team of Scotia Gas Networks, SGN, employees when they faced an NHS side on the artificial pitch at Cowes Enterprise College on Sunday. The total now stands at £500. In their second game of the fundraising series of football matches, SGM were given a much tougher game, with NHS starting the better and forcing the SGN keeper to make 3 great saves. On 20 minutes, NHS won a penalty and went in front and added a second 5 minutes later, but SGM pulled it back to 2-1. Just before half-time, SGM picked up the tempo and scored 2 further goals to go 3-2 up. SGN's superior fitness told in the second half as they added 5 more goals to make it 8-2, with their skipper, Morgan Perrin, completing a hat-trick. Cowes Enterprise College allowed the game to be played on their artificial pitch, free of charge. SGN's next fundraising match will be against an Isle of Wight Prison Service team on Sunday, February the 18th. A minimum fundraising target of £1,000 has been set.
TV show hunts for new talent. Isle of Wight residents are being sought for the new series of hit ITV show Britain's Got Talent. Have you got what it takes to impress judges Simon Cowell, Alicia Dixon, Amanda Holden, and Bruno Tonioli? The casting team for the series is on the lookout for islanders to showcase their talent and take part. A post on Facebook from a casting researcher for the show said, "Hi, Isle of Wight. I am on the casting team for Britain's Got Talent, and I am on the hunt for talent. This can be of any genre, whether it's singing, dancing, danger, comedy, playing the spoons, puppetry, anything goes. I would love to hear from you. Those interested in showing off their talent are being asked to email their details to harriet.fisher@thames.tv. The show returns for its 17th series in 2024. Are you going to try your luck on Britain's Got Talents? Share your views with us. Email us at the desk on editor@isleofwightcountypress.co.uk.
Much-loved musician dies at 80. Tributes are being paid to a well-known and much-loved Isle of Wight musician who has died aged 80. Chris Mew from Sandown passed away at Mountbatten Hospice on August the 15th following a battle with liver cancer. For more than 60 years, Chris performed in the island's music scene, and over the years he featured in several bands. He even played with Phil and Boone Gould of Level 42 and worked with frontman Mark King before the band took off. Chris's stepdaughter, Helena Mace, said Phil came to his funeral and they had planned to work together again. They also performed together back in April for his birthday, she said. During his music career, Chris also played in Midnight Creepers, The Meteors, and most recently Firefly, among other bands. Donations from his funeral went to the hospice, which looked after Chris in his final days.
Man suffers head injury. A man was taken to hospital with head injuries after a group of burglars broke into his caravan and stole valuable items during the early hours of the morning. Police are investigating an aggravated burglary on the 2nd of November off Newport Road near Apps Heath. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary was called at 1:54 a.m. to reports a man in his 50s had been assaulted by a group of burglars who stole a phone and a Cartier watch. The man suffered a head injury, which required hospital treatment, but was not deemed life-threatening. Police inquiries remain ongoing. A spokesperson for the force said, "If anyone has information about this incident or has been offered sale of a Cartier watch in suspicious circumstances, please contact the police on 101. Contact Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary through its website or via Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111.
Damning rating for residential home. A residential home was served a 1-star food hygiene rating after high-risk foods were found to be nearly double the temperature they should be. Following a recent inspection by the Isle of Wight Council's Environmental Health Department, major improvement was necessary at Sandowns Capri residential home on St John's Road. A spokesperson at the residential home, which is run by Isle of Wight Care Limited, has since said all the recommendations from the inspection have been covered and they are requesting a revisit from officers. Inspectors visited in October and handed down the damning rating, which was then appealed by the residential home. Having previously scored a 40, it went up to 35, but remained as major improvement necessary under the Food Standard Agency guidelines, which determines the higher the numerical score, the lower the standard rating. In the external dry store, inspectors said the general standard of hygiene was unsatisfactory, as mould or mildew was over the freezer and cobwebs and other debris were over the walls and ceiling. Inspectors also saw the rest home was failing to implement controls and monitoring procedures. High-risk foods, including pasties, were being stored in the refrigerator at 14 degrees centigrade when they must be stored at 8 degrees centigrade or below to stop the growth of food poisoning bacteria and moulds. The residential home's policy was that the fridge should be kept below 5 degrees centigrade to ensure a safe temperature and would be monitored through a digital air thermometer. Instead, an air temperature sensor was placed in a pack of lard, which inspectors said provided a false reading. They also said that there were no records to show staff had checked the equipment was working effectively, and no corrective action was taken once staff were aware of the issue. The inspectors said they found the same issues as at an inspection 5 years ago. It warned if it found the same issues again on future visits, it would consider enforcement action, which may include prosecution proceedings. A spokesperson for Capri said a new fridge had been installed to rectify the temperature issue.
Missing Labrador is reunited with owners. The owners of an Isle of Wight dog who was missing for more than a week have thanked those who helped to reunite them. Chocolate Labrador Aretina disappeared earlier this month. The 7-year-old accidentally fell from her owner's van on Pan Lane, Newport, along with 2 other dogs. Passers-by managed to grab hold of 2 of the pets, but Aretina was spooked and fled up the road towards Burnt House Lane. Following her disappearance, sightings and updates were posted in the Facebook group Lost Pets Isle of Wight. A week later, Aretina's owner, and the other 2 dogs walked around the area where she had been spotted to lay down a fresh scent. Much to their amazement, when they returned to check at 5:30 a.m. the next day, Aretina was found sitting in the van.
Plea for help from Food Bank. Ventnor Community Food Bank is working with local schools to provide Christmas parcels for local families in need, and you can help too. The charity has got a list of items they would love to have donated. Items can be dropped off at donation points, which include Ventnor Co-op, St Catherine's Church and Norris stores in Knighton. You can also donate at the food bank on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at Baby Box in Victoria Street. So far in 2023, the food bank has fed 1,059 people, 781 adults and 278 children. The volunteers have been much busier than this time last year. Financial donations can also be made. Another way to support the cause is to purchase Ventnor Exchange's Brave Island Christmas card. Acceptable items include gift toiletries, boxes of biscuits, chocolates, sweets, mince pies, Christmas puddings, chutney, jams, peanut butter, tea bags, coffee, hot chocolate, tinned fish, sponge puddings and tinned soup. More information can be found by calling 07862 247 694.
Pest delayed air ambulance launch. A pest who bombarded the emergency services with more than 1,000 nuisance and abusive calls, putting lives at risk by preventing genuine calls from being answered and causing distress to call handlers, thanked magistrates for the fair and just fine he received. Michael Clifton Smith of High Street, Ventnor, admitted 3 counts of persistently using the public communication network to cause annoyance, inconvenience, or anxiety, together with failing to comply with a community protection notice on the 16th of June and obstructing a police officer on the 11th of July. Between the 22nd of March 2022 and February 14th, 2023, Clifton Smith made around 1,000 calls to the emergency services via 999 and 111, during which he made threats to kill an operator, saying, "I'll cut you down," said Lawrence Stone, prosecuting. Although most of Clifton Smith's calls were ramblings, many caused emergency call handlers distress, with one describing how he caused her heart palpitations and nausea, another describing how he was calling her a witch and a bitch. The 35-year-old's call to the Alouette ambulance service had in one instant caused a delay in the launching of the air ambulance. Clifton Smith failed to heed warnings from the police not to contact the emergency services unless there was an immediate risk to life or property. Subsequently, he was made subject to a community protection notice in April, preventing him from making nuisance and abusive calls. However, the calls continued in June. On the 11th of June, the police attended his home address to arrest him, but he refused to let them in. When they attempted to gain entry, Clifton Smith slammed his front door on an officer and kicked his shin. For Clifton Smith, Robert Cameron said, a pre-sentencing report flagged learning disabilities and an autistic spectrum disorder, which had made a major impact on his behavior. He has no intention of making such calls again, Mr. Cameron added. After magistrates fined him £240 with a £96 surcharge and £85 cost, Clifton Smith thanked them for the fair and just outcome and told them, "You know when a person goes off the rails, then comes back on them again. That's me."
We're now going to move on to White Memories and Nostalgia. With love from the front line. In 2013, a remarkable discovery was made in a Victorian house in Newport that had been home to the Brimson family for many years. A collection of nearly 400 letters was discovered in the loft, written over 100 years ago. They were shared by Ernest Bob Brimson, a soldier then serving on the Somme, and his fiancée Mabel, known as Mabs, and also between other family members. Besides war news, the letters contain a wealth of local history. Throughout the war, Mabs wrote to Bob from her home and father's pub, the Bedford on the Mall at Newport. On September the 27th, 1914, she wrote, "Upward and his pals still come in the evenings. We get all soldiers up to 7:30. Ben Sykes, Frenchy, Phlox and Mr. Chaplin were in last night. They were wedged up in a corner while a crowd of soldiers took possession of the rest of the room. It was payday. There was a racket when they all tried to sing at once." A few days later she wrote, "My dearest boy, it seems as if you were here on Monday. I had such a grand dream about you. I couldn't shake it off all day. Our bell has vanished out of the parlour again. We must tie the next one in." Immediately following the outbreak of war, pub opening hours were restricted to between 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. The Bedford's trade suffered, as Mabs told Bob on October the 27th, 1914. "The Hants Regiment are leaving the island this week. There is a rush and scramble from 6:30 till 9 o'clock every evening now. I don't know how it will be when they leave. If it wasn't for the soldiers, we should have scarcely any trade at all. I keep on wishing you were safe here. Never mind, my love, I will write again soon. From your loving Mabs." On October the 7th, 1914, Bob's mother wrote to him, "My dear Bob, I posted off the county press to you. George Urry tells Minnie his chum was shot down at his side and killed. A close shave for George, wasn't it? Do you think the war will last much longer? For George Urry, it was his last close shave." Kath, Bob's sister, wrote to Bob on February the 17th, 1915. "I suppose Mabel has told you about poor old George Urry. It was Saturday morning when Mrs. Urry came staggering around here. She could hardly stand with a letter in her hand from his sergeant major to say George had been shot. Died instantly, of course. She made Mother read it to her. Poor woman. She was dreadfully upset. And poor Minnie, too. She'd had a letter as well, and one that George had written to her, ready to post." Bob provided the sound end piece, September the 25th, 1916. "Dear Mother and Father, we have moved to where George Urry was killed. I'm going to have a look for his grave and see how it is kept up. I was also very sorry to hear of Dick Murphy being killed out here. He has such nice kiddies too.
On a brighter note, Doris Brimson, Bob's 16-year-old niece, a confident and witty writer, wrote to him from her home at Melbourne Street, Newport. The Islands Railway companies at that time had a terrible reputation, one of the lines being referred to as a dustbin on wheels. One particular line was referred to in Doris' letter to Bob in December 1916. There was not half a nice concert at the drill hole. They took off the freshwater railway line like a treat. The man says, I was on the 11:39 to Freshwater. Suddenly the train stopped. Then there was an awful crash. The man at the piano touches the top note so as you could just hear. Carriages were piled up on top of each other. The guard got off to investigate and found a fly on the line. Ironically, in early 1917, Doris left school to begin work as a clerk for that worrisome railway company in their office at the bottom of Honey Hill, from where she wrote to Bob in her spare moments, and she seems to have had plenty of those. On February the 18th, 1917, she wrote, Dear Bob, it's quite decent down the office. There is a fire to roast chestnuts on. One of the other clerks brings bullseyes and I provide the chestnuts. Then the fun begins. This all happens when the manager goes home to dinner at 12. He does not come back till 2:30. So Mrs. Camille, Gordon and I are left on our lonesome. Don't we work too? Gordon has a yarn over the telephone with his pal on the Central Railway and uses the phone and forgets to pay. Miss Camille, the other clerk, and I read and eat. Fine, is not it? And I go home at 4. The full collection of letters can be found in From Newport to the Somme by Alan Stroud and Richard Brimson, available to order from local shops.
We now move to My View. Dr. Nicholas England, former head teacher of Ryde School and immediate past chairman of governors to the Isle of Wight College. I have never regretted moving to the Isle of Wight 26 years ago, during which time I have been involved with 2 very different educational institutions, Ryde School as head teacher and the Isle of Wight College as governor, latterly as chairman. With a pleasing symmetry, I spent 16 years with each, though simple arithmetic shows that there was some overlap in my service. An independent school is relatively easy to run. There is a tight academic curriculum, resources are plentiful, and there is no excuse for anything other than good outcomes. It is much more challenging to run a further education college when the government has continually undervalued this sector. FE funding has fallen by 8% in real terms over the last 10 years, with each full-time student funded only to about £4,000 per annum, compared with a secondary school pupil who receives 50% more. When I first became a governor, I was struck by the sheer complexity of the FE curriculum. The backbone of FE delivery has been the business and technology educational qualifications, or BTECs. These include 20 vocational and practical areas of learning, such as childcare, health and social care, construction, plumbing, and engineering. Courses are studied at various levels, producing numerous permutations to be staffed and timetabled for more than 4,000 students, including 1,700 full-time 16 to 19-year-olds, a third of whom are retaking Maths or English GCSE. The college also works in partnership with employers, welcoming 100 apprentices who attend the college for a day each week. A similar number study for degrees in partnership with the University of Portsmouth. In 2021, the Department of Education designated the college as the University Centre Isle of Wight. It is no wonder that I was in awe of the two principals with whom I worked. They were visionary, energetic, and optimistic, and always focused on their students. A trip to the college for a governor's meeting was a humbling experience. I saw results improve and students benefit from strong and professional teaching before progressing to higher education or employment.
Recently, the Prime Minister announced his intention to combine A-levels and technical levels, that is the T-levels, into an advanced British standard. There are too many students completing uneconomic degrees, with trained people for jobs that do not exist. As Gillian Keegan, Secretary of State for Education, observed during her recent visit to the island, the arbitrary target set by a previous government to get 50% of young people into university were counterproductive and out of touch with the needs of business. Over the last 2 years, further education colleges have introduced T-levels. These courses have a high standard of entry requiring good GCSE passes, including Maths and English, and are designed to prepare people for skilled work without having to go to university. A T-level is the equivalent of 3 A-levels and requires the students to spend 80% of their time in the classroom and 20% in work placements. Subject areas covered include accounting, agriculture, building services, digital business services, education and early years, engineering and manufacture, management and administration, legal services, science and health science. At least the government has woken up to the value of vocational training. The Isle of Wight College, with specialisms in business and engineering, is well placed to respond to local needs, having invested both in Newport and the state-of-the-art Centre for Excellence in Composite Advanced Manufacturing and Marine facility in Whippingham. These proposed changes are for the good. While many professions will always require graduates, we will see growth in the further education sector as bright young people train for jobs that are desperately needed, while earning every bit as much as their graduate contemporaries.
Public information, MP's column, 5 updates for Islanders. Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley. I've no less than 5 updates for County Press readers this week. First, pharmacies. Changes have now started for our island pharmacies to offer more services. It's what other countries do. It's convenient and quick, and it means you don't have to go to the GP for some basic but important things. These include blood pressure checks and easier access for women to reproductive health and birth control. It also includes quicker access to medication to help with 7 common health conditions: sinusitis, sore throat, earache, infected insect bites, impetigo, shingles, and uncomplicated urinary tract infections. These are important, beneficial changes, especially for island women. Second, buses. The Conservative government has confirmed that the popular £2 bus fare scheme will continue until the end of 2024. This scheme is being very well used, not least by yours truly. Its extension is great news for islanders. Getting more people on the buses helps with the cost of living, gets people out and about, and is great for reducing car emissions. Third, while we're on the subject of good news generally, the government confirmed this week that we've secured £13.6 million to improve walking and cycling networks across the island, and specifically the West White cycle route, which will be a critical addition to our network. I hope we can also use some of the funds to repair existing routes, and thank you to those who've contacted me about the condition of the Sandown to Newport cycle route. Fourth, on floods, we received confirmation that assistance is being made available to households affected by the recent flooding. I know many people were devastated by the impact of the floods. Finally, the tax cuts in the Chancellor's autumn statement on Wednesday. In brief, the triple lock on pensions is protected. We need to look after pensioners. National insurance tax cuts for 27 million people. The average nurse will be £500 better off. The average police officer £630 better off. The biggest business tax cut in modern history will drive investment and growth in the economy. The national living wage increase by more than £1 an hour to £11.44 an hour from April is extended to younger people. We've unveiled a major package of welfare reforms to a massive back-to-work plan with new sanctions for those who can work but choose not to. The government will make sure that working always pays.
And now we turn to letters. Lots of us are. A letter from M. Hughes of Newport. Dear editor, the latest migration figures are truly shocking. The number of people coming here is 1.4 million, nearly 10 times the number of people living on the island, a record high. The net migration numbers are lowered to 745,000 because more than 500,000 Britons every year are fleeing abroad from a country many of us no longer recognize. Is it any wonder that many British people who have paid into the system all their lives can no longer find a home, get a GP appointment, or see a dentist? And yet, I am well aware that many of these health services are kept afloat by foreign doctors or dentists. But that does not change the reality of our everyday lives. I look up the Conservative Party manifesto for 2019 online. That's right, the promises that this government and our town MP, Bob Seeley, made to us. It's there in black and white. We were promised an Australian-style point systems which would keep track of who is coming in and out of our country, and overall numbers will come down. I have always voted Conservative before, but never ever again.
Education needs funding support. Peter Shreve, Assistant District Secretary of the National Education Union. Education is fundamental to development and growth. This is why investing properly in education is an urgent and overriding economic priority. Just 3.9% of UK GDP is spent on education, compared to the 5% OECD average. This was highlighted to Chancellor Jeremy Hunt in a letter earlier this month from 4 education union leaders, including the NEU. Yet again, government seems not to care, oblivious to act. The Chancellor's response is completely inadequate. Indeed, a travesty of the Prime Minister's repeated claim that education is the most powerful way we can transform people's lives. Education does not appear to be at the heart of government priorities. Why isn't Jeremy Hunt concerned that 88% of Ireland mainstream schools will struggle with cost increases in 2024-25? Some island schools are already starting to consider and even plan for redundancies. Cuts to education provision are now inevitable. Education has seen years of underinvestment. Island staff, particularly in primary, are worried that already overstretched further staff cuts will cause further pain. Ignoring the issues fails young people. In order to recruit and retain staff that we so clearly need, government must demonstrate they value them. That means an urgent, properly funded and major correction in pay alongside the investment needed to reduce sky-high workload. The Chancellor's statement does nothing to repair the damage caused by 13 years of Conservative cuts. There was almost no autumn statement reference to education, no reference to staff recruitment and retention, and no support for the rising tide of mental health and special education needs. If the Prime Minister cares so much about education, he should stop continuing to ignore the issues, show he cares, and fund it.
Stop Tory bashing. A letter from C. Clark Brightstone. Dear editor, yet again your island soapbox is full of Tory bashing letters. Does your paper have an affiliation with an opposition party? Yes, I have previously voted Tory, mostly on the basis that the thought of having Labour on the helm fills me with dread. Yes, the Tories have made a mess over the last 4 years, and I would not vote for them next time, based on their performance. But what's the alternative? The Liberal Democrats are unlikely to gain power in my lifetime. So we are left no other choice than Keir Starmer and his merry band of misfits. The man who has no policies other than to oppose everyone else's policies. The man who cannot answer a straight question unless someone else has scripted an answer for him in preparation. A man who does not know how to define a woman and will give in to the union's demands at the top of a hat. So if you think things are bad under the Tories now, give Keir Starmer a few years and you will really see what a mess is. If you want a clue look at Sadiq Khan's performance over his tenure, please, Isle of Wight Observer, stop the political bias. It's getting boring.
It's now goodbye from Francis.
And goodbye from Gerard.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Tonight we seesaw wildly between the ultra-modern and the deeply traditional. After all, what could be more traditional than meeting and falling in love?
So I'd gone along to Parkrun and I was introduced to Mike, who guided me round Parkrun, and we just kind of clicked. We just started getting to know each other and chatting along the way. You know, the more miles we ran, the more we got to know each other.
More about Love on the Run later in the programme. But first, the very latest on what seems certain to be a highly digital future for all of us, visually impaired people included. But that's the point. Will we be included, or will we be left behind as the pace of change continues to gather speed? After all, doesn't matter what you do these days. Work, shop, bank, learn, seek healthcare, date. Technological literacy is becoming increasingly vital. Hence the importance of a conference last week hosted by AbilityNet. That's a charity which promotes the use of technology for visually impaired people. The conference involved many of the big players in this field: Google, Microsoft, Sony, some of the big banks, and it described itself as championing digital accessibility and the business case for inclusivity. So, did it live up to its billing? Robin Spinks is Head of Inclusive Design at the RNIB. He was there, he even got himself on a panel. Robin, you're an enthusiastic user of technology. First, a general question. What were the key things you took from this conference?
Well, Peter, technology is changing constantly, isn't it? And I think bringing people together to focus on those changes and how they can be embraced is absolutely critical. Lots of conversations about AI and machine learning, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, but also a lot of questions and a lot of conversation about how businesses are adopting technology, how they're adopting accessibility, and more importantly, embedding it into their practices, their DNA, if you like.
But presumably part of the problem is persuading them that it is actually worth their while. I know what people tend to say is, of course, we are there for everyone and so forth, but these organisations are also about money, they're about profit. You have to persuade them it's in their interests. How do you do that?
I think at RNIB we're working with lots of businesses where we're seeing more people, more organisations and business leaders committed to accessibility. They recognise that this makes absolute sense. And it's often about winning executive sponsorship. This is about executive leaders buying into the motivation, buying into the business case, and understanding that if you make something more accessible for disabled people, for blind and partially sighted people, you make it more accessible for everybody else. And actually there's a business benefit, whatever your industry happens to be.
OK, well, you can't talk about technology at the moment without discussing AI. You've already mentioned it. Is that the step change for VR users that many people are claiming? And what would you pick out as the developments that are already coming on stream, which could make a real difference to us?
I think in time, AI will deliver huge benefits for all of us, and certainly for those of us who live with a visual impairment. Actually, we're seeing already huge outputs that are helpful. Picture descriptions, for example. Ask a person to describe a picture, then ask an AI to describe a picture. It's really quite illuminating. So we're seeing much richer, more vivid descriptions of images. We'll see a lot of changes to the way that people experience customer service. So simple transactions like booking and buying, which can be a real frustration online, we'll see those transactions simplified into speech-driven transactions that can deliver much more quickly. But, it's not a magic bullet. And I think that's what we've got to be really careful about. The fundamental principle remains that designers and creators and developers of software and hardware and services need to create those products in ways that are inclusive. That fundamental focus on good inclusive design practice, that's not going to shift.
And presumably there's quite a lot of competition in this field. I mean, I think, for example, in this whole business of using AI to describe things, Google and Microsoft have both got new stuff around, haven't they, which was probably demonstrated at this conference?
Yeah. So Copilot is the facility that Microsoft were talking about. It's embedded in the Microsoft 365 apps that you use every day: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, and more. So Copilot gives you a first draft to edit and iterate on, and then you kind of saving you hours in writing, sourcing and editing. So you could be creating a checklist, or you could be creating an itinerary, or maybe even a work plan, and you could use it to actually create much more quickly than you would typically be able to do if you were typing and thinking and stopping and editing. Bard from Google, which is the AI facility that Google have developed, Bard will allow someone who's blind or partially sighted to speak into the application and actually ask a question and get an output not dissimilar to what you can currently do, for example, on ChatGPT, where you can get, summarized information presented in a paragraph, sentence form. I would be cautious. Let me just say, if it's for work, I would be cautious about fact-checking and cross-checking. But if I want a quick summary of something, of maybe legislation in an area, or I want a quick summary of what to pack for a paddleboarding trip, that was my personal example, Bard was able to think of things that I actually missed. For example, the tide times. I needed to make sure that I had a whistle, for example. I had drinks packed. So it's got a huge relevance for personal day-to-day independence in life, and also from a work point of view. But I think absolutely critical is giving people the confidence how to use those technologies. We mustn't forget people who are not perhaps as enthusiastic about technology as I am. We can't leave people behind. So I think absolutely critical is that mainstream advances in AI continue to benefit blind and partially sighted people. There shouldn't be a divide in terms of what people experience.
Well, hang on, let's explore that idea of a divide, because, there are two digital divides, aren't there, Robin? There's the divide between sighted people and very competent visually impaired people like you, and there's the divide between the competent VI people and those, and I'd include myself in this, who struggle with the basics. How do you deal with that?
I think there's a responsibility on all of us to share our knowledge, and sharing kind of stories, but also sharing strategies and hacks, because often that's what it takes, is just that confidence to know that someone who's the same age as you has mastered it, they've moved a little bit further along, and understanding that you're not alone, because it can be quite daunting. If you live on your own and you're an older person, technology must be really daunting. So enabling them to see that technology can make your life better, and it can be a great support and companion.
Do you think that we may be seeing perhaps a bit of a recognition on the part of some big commercial companies that they shouldn't lose the human touch? We know of at least one supermarket chain who are moving away from technology at the checkout and going back to fully staffed checkouts. Could this be the start of a trend, do you think?
This is interesting, Peter, isn't it? This is Booths, the supermarket chain predominantly in the north of England, just last week announced that, they would be actually moving stores back to staffed checkouts rather than having a purely self-service checkout function. And what that underlines is exactly what you've said, the importance of good human support. We're very happy to see an environment where you've got a mix of human intervention and technology that's accessible to people. So it'll be really interesting to watch this and see whether this is a one-off. I suspect we'll see the same thing happen in other parts of the retail world, but let's watch this one.
So surely, as well as clever ideas, we need legislation, don't we, to make sure that ideas are presented in an accessible form, almost as a matter of course. We haven't really got that in the UK, have we?
Well, we continue at RNIB to campaign for legislation, and we're looking, of course, right now at the European Accessibility Act. That's one tool that will come into force. In fact, member states have got until 2025 to essentially present and have enforceable legislation in country. I'm not a lawyer. My legal colleagues will give you a much fuller description. But, one of the things that we want to see is companies being required to provide a minimum standard of accessibility.
But, we're not in the EU. How much benefit are we going to get from European legislation?
Well, it remains to be seen, but one of the things that is encouraging is we know from discussions with a number of manufacturers that, companies don't intend to develop a product for the EU market and then one for the UK. What will happen is products will be designed to comply with the European legislation, and even though the UK is not in the EU, we'll get the same product, if you like. Lots of the bigger manufacturers are making an EU version of a product, like they would make a US version, and that EU version will need to come up to the kind of standard that will be required in legislation. It's our understanding that the European Accessibility Act will cover self-service kiosks and checkouts. So it will be really interesting to see how this progresses.
Robin Spinks, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Thank you, Peter.
Now, let's take a break from tech, shall we? Anyone who listens regularly to In Touch will know that blind or partially sighted people who've had the urge to take up running, either to enter serious competition or as a way of getting fitter or just for fun, often team up with a sighted guide to achieve the best results. Well, that's exactly what Kelly Barton did several years ago when she met Mike Leatherbarrow. You can imagine that to run together, you do need confidence and trust in each other to make it work. But now Kelly and Mike have taken that a stage further. Earlier this month, they got married. I've been talking to them both, and I began by asking Kelly how it all started.
I'd gone along to parkrun because I wanted to get more, fit and healthy. Obviously, when you're blind, it can be a lot more challenging to access, physical activity and sport. So I'd gone along to parkrun, and I was introduced to Mike, who guided me round parkrun, and we just kind of clicked. We just started getting to know each other and chatting along the way. After doing so many park runs, then I wanted to do a 10k, then a half marathon, then we did the London Marathon, and I guess the more miles we ran, the more we got to know each other.
So, was it an instant attraction, or did the chemistry take a while to kick in?
I think there was a spark from me straight away. I think I kind of knew that I liked Mike. And I think he was the same, but because we sort of built this solid friendship, it was then difficult to kind of go, oh, actually, this could be more. So I think both of us didn't know what to do for a while, and then yeah, it did happen.
Well, we'll bring in Mike on that in a minute. Just one more question for you. What were you, as the visually impaired part of the combination, what were you looking for in a running partner? What makes the partnership work?
Obviously everything is based on trust, putting my cane down to kind of run with someone and hoping that they keep me safe. Someone that was kind of patient as well, because I wasn't very good at running at the start, but also someone I could get on with and have a laugh with. And, it wasn't just about the running, because when you get into doing longer distances, you need to be able to enjoy a chat with someone. So you definitely need to click with your guide runner, I think.
Right. So Mike, how did you get involved in being a guide runner in the first place? Because Kelly wasn't your first partner, was she?
No, that's right. So I was inspired after being a volunteer at the London 2012 Paralympic Games. Soon after that, I took up running, loved it, and then I chose to become and train as a guide runner to ensure that other people can appreciate the love of running that I found. It was just inspiring, awe-inspiring to see what can be achieved when someone gives the opportunity to someone else to achieve.
Right. Now, this is to both of you, really, because Kelly mentioned that you sort of chatted and talked. I'd have thought you'd be a bit too breathless to have much conversation in this situation. How did that work?
Well, Mike is a really fast runner. He's much faster than me, so he's always got enough breath to chat. And when you do long runs, you kind of run a lot slower than your normal pace. If I'm doing a fast 5k park run, there's no way I have a chat. But if we're doing a long marathon training run, then, you're a lot slower, so you do have the ability to chat then.
Kelly, this was a 5k run.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought in terms of actual competition, sporting competition for this?
Not beyond, I've done sort of half marathons and marathons, but no, and I enjoy doing that. I love parkrun in this because I think it's almost like a competition with yourself, because you want to see your times getting quicker. But beyond that, it's inspired me to do more sports, beyond running, which has been great because
you tandem ride as well, don't you now?
Tandem ride. I do some VI tennis, and I joined a blind baseball team.
That's interesting.
And I wouldn't have done any of these things prior to my, I only started running when I was 40. So I feel like I'm doing everything now that's fun that probably most people do in the 20s, but I'm enjoying it. So it's fine.
So this is to both of you. What happens if, because, romance has bloomed, as we've said, what happens if you're in the middle of a row, if you're going for a run or entering a competition? What happens then if there's a bit of a, freeze on?
Well, I have to say, it has happened.
Yeah, I thought it might have done. Yeah.
We're doing cross country not so long ago, and I absolutely hated it, and I didn't want to carry on because it was just awful. There was mud everywhere. It was just horrendous. And Mike was saying, "No, you never give up. You never give up. Come on, keep going. It's fine." And I was saying, "Yeah, it's all right for you. You can see what's ahead." And we did have a bit of and we were the last people to finish it. The steward was at the back of us, sort of having to stand there to see if we were going to carry on while we had this row. And then we did carry on, of course. And of course, I finished it. And she came over at the end and congratulated us.
We better get Mike's view on this. I mean, It sounds as if you were very tolerant. Why didn't you run her into the nettles?
Not intentionally, of course not.
No.
But I think as you do longer journeys, usually as a runner, you go through different stages and you feel like you can't do it and you're struggling, you're combating with yourself. And normally you experience that by yourself, so you can go through those emotions. But of course, when being guided, I'm directly next to Kelly. So when she's saying, I can't do this, I really hate this. And it's quite a skill to not take that personally, to understand it's just going through those various levels and phases of the challenge of the long duration. But yes, the cross country was probably our only time we did have a disagreement, but we agreed at the end like we always do.
Just one more question about one thing that was pointed out to me when you're on television. Mike, you're quite a lot taller than Kelly, aren't you?
Yes. I'm 5'11", and Kelly, I should probably correct me, 4'10" or 9 and 3. A little bit, yes. That's the important bit, that little bit. Yeah.
So how does that work? Presumably that will have an effect on your stride as well, won't it, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Moore just has to try and match my stride, unfortunately. But what we do is the tether is on Mike's lower arm so that I can reach it. We use the Ramble tag, so it's on his lower arm and then I hold the handle rather than putting it any further up. So it works fine. And actually now, sometimes when I run with someone my own height or similar heights, it feels weird because I've kind of got used to my arm being slightly up.
Right. So do you mind shortening your stride, Mike?
Oh, not at all. The Ramble tag has allowed Kelly to naturally swing her arms now, where previous to that it was quite static and it caused a bit of aches and pains and so forth. But it does come naturally now, and I can use that to base if she's struggling or she can go quicker. So it's a good feedback mechanism.
So are you going to carry on running now that you are hitched?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, always looking forward to the next running challenge. We have applied for the Berlin Marathon next year, so if we got in that'd be quite nice, and that'd be our next challenge. But for now, we'll probably carry on with our park runs, which we love. We just love the whole community of park run, and sometimes we go and just walk it and really enjoy that. And Mike and I both volunteer at park run, so we love all the aspects of it and the different ways that people can get involved. So that's really nice.
Right. Well, look, many congratulations, Kelly Barton, Mike Leatherbarrow. We wish you all the best, both with running and with married life. Thank you. And that's all for today. You can email us with your comments, intouch@bbc.co.uk. You can leave us a voice message on 016 836 1338 or go to our website bbc.co.uk/intouch. From me, Peter White, producer Beth Hemmings and studio managers James Bradshaw and Simon Highfield, goodbye.
Scaffolding and Skips News, week commencing the 27th of November 2023. Newport area, JD Sports, 110 to 112 High Street. Key House, Key Street. 11, corner of St James Street, /Lugley Street. 102 High Street. Oxfam, 34 Upper St James Street. 113 Pyle Street, Pittis, 28 St James Street, 32 Chapel Street, 22 New Street, Age UK, 114 Pyle Street, 10 Key Street, 17 Pavement in Albert Street, Terrace Road, 8 Caesars Road.
Skips Newport area, 70 Mayfield Drive. Scaffolding Ride area, Union Nail Salon, 78 Union Street. Nationwide, 3 St Thomas Square, Cross Street. Block 10 to 11 Cross Street, 14 to 16 George Street, River Overbank, Upper Green Road, St. Helens. Ride Skips, 14 Winton Street. Cowes Area, 126 High Street. East Cowes Area, The Barracks, Guard House, Albany Road, 13 York Avenue.
Ventnor Area, Miramare Court, Hanborough Road, Cliffview, Hanborough Road, Hurst, 4 High Street, Lewis Cottage, Market Street. Ventnor Area Skips, 43 Leeson Road. Sandown Area, 42 Fitzroy Street, 85 High Street. Shanklin Area, 6 Cross Street, 73 Regent Street. Shanklin Chic, 61 High Street. Domino's, 5 Regent Street. Yarmouth Area Skips, Local Shop, The Broadway, Tottenham.